What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason and Joe here. Another classic album review for you today. We're talking about the 1970 album Curtis by Curtis Mayfield. This is his debut solo album following his time with the Impressions. Got a little bit more of like a funk and psychedelic flair to it than the Impressions stuff. I think I've heard bits and pieces of this before. I don't know if I've ever had a full listen or not.
I have. I listened to a couple times. I've listened to some of the impression stuff before. And then following Curtis, you have, of course, Superfly in 72. I don't think I ever listened to Roots, which is his next one. So this is his debut. And it comes just a year after at least one Impressions record, which I listened to for our 1969 deep dive, even though for some reason I wrote it in the 1968 part of my log, so it didn't show up on any of my 69 lists. But I like that. I like the impressions. We listened to the one for 63, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, I like Curtis Mayfield generally speaking, and I listened to Superfly. Can't remember now if I listened to the 69 Impressions record or not. I think I did. Can't remember what I thought of it. Okay, let's get into it though. The songwriting on this record. He takes more of like a political stance on this, more societal commentary type of thing. There's a lot of that going on in the late 60s, early 70s. I think some of it works here and some of it not as much. I don't think his lyrics are always as sharp as he maybe would hope, and I think sometimes they can be like a little too on the nose where it feels like the message is maybe like he's putting message ahead of the music, or the music is being sacrificed in some way to get the message across. Something like Marvin Gaye, The Following Year, What's Going On, I think has a more successful marriage of message and music. But that's not to say that all of the tracks here are failures in that way. I think the first two are maybe the biggest examples of what I'm talking about there. But then elsewhere on tracks like We the People Who Are Darker Than Blue, I think works a bit better. Move On Up, of course, is a great jam, and kind of talking about Black progress on that track. And Miss Black America, I think, is really strong. Celebration of Black women and Black beauty and pride. Those ones, kind of a mixed bag. And then you have your less political songs like Give It Up at the end, which is like a relationship, like end of a relationship type breakup song, which I think is killer. I think that is maybe where his strength lies. So songwriting for me, I think it's a mixed bag. I think some of these songs are great. I don't think they all work incredibly well, though.
Yeah, I mean, I like pretty much all the songs as far as them being songs goes. The lyrics, they're sometimes a little too on the nose, maybe, and his rhymes may sometimes they're a little simple. Like it just feels like too obvious. There's not a lot like under the surface. He's basically just saying, this is how it is. And I don't know if there's enough subtext to make it like truly great lyrics. I like, like the thought, don't worry if there's a hell below, we're all going to go. I think that's a smart title. I don't know if the song itself totally like backs up the title itself. I do like the relationship songs, The Makings of You, which is sort of a domicile, the joys of domesticity, and then Give It Up, more of a breakup song. The political stuff, I think is fine. I don't think it's as sharp as some of the other of his contemporaries around the same time. Um, but I think there's a good mix um, of the two. The funkier stuff seems to be more political. And then he'll drop into like the makings of you is practically like Smokey and the Miracles, smooth pop. And I think both of them work pretty well, but neither of them are like the best, I think, of the respective genres.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said about If There's a Hell Below. Killer title, and that's like the title is the highlight of the tune, lyrically at least. I don't think he says much more interesting than that. Musicianship, basically, I have no notes. I think all the playing on it is great. If you lump his vocals into musicianship, the only thing that I would say there is that I think I mean, it's hard to criticize Curtis Mayfield as a vocalist because he's incredible, but at the same time, I don't think he is like the most dynamic singer. He approaches every song kind of the same way. And of course, across the course of an album, you just get that falsetto, and it doesn't matter if it's a political song or like a slow jam love song or a breakup song or if it's an angry song or a sad song. His vocal delivery doesn't change much. So for me, that's the one little negative. When he's in his wheelhouse, when he's doing like those classic type soul tunes, I mean, there's nothing better. His voice is amazing, but I don't think it like is super flexible in terms of the types of songs he can fully pull off.
Yeah, I never really thought about it like that. Like I said, it kind of makes sense. He does sort of just sound the same on everything. The playing itself, though, obviously the band is pretty fantastic. The bass playing, obviously, it's gonna be great. Really love the drumming from Henry Gibson, one of the few named people on the album. There's a bunch of people I'd never really heard of. It wasn't like, the Funk Brothers or anybody in particular. But Henry Gibson stood out for his drumming. I love that like almost hollow sound to some of the drums. Really cool. He has a couple like little solos and spotlight performances on a couple tracks. The Other Side of Town and We the People Who Are Darker Than Blue. Just love that sound. Such a unique sound to it. And the horns are great. The strings and the orchestration are just phenomenal. And yeah, it's probably the highlight for me is the playing, especially on um, Move On Up. That indelible opening riff is so good. It's what Kanye used. He sampled it on Touch the Sky. That's probably where some people may know it from, but uh, it's just perfection. It's a great sample, great use of sampling there by a terrible person. And there's some fun harp on a couple tracks, and I don't know. It's just if you're gonna listen to this album, I think you're gonna do it because it's Curtis Mayfield, but you should be paying very close attention to the instrumentation because it's as good as I've heard up to 1970, I'll say.
So then the production is produced by Curtis Mayfield, and I think there's a couple other people listed as producers as well. Not names that I was familiar with, but I admittedly don't know that many like R&B, soul, funk producers from around this time. I think the production is great. It's again no notes. I think it sounds like the late 60s, early 70s, which is my favorite era of production. I think the strings and horns, like you said, just like the arranging of them is incredible. The way his voice sits in the mix and kind of sits out in front. And yeah, I think it sounds great. No issues.
Yeah, the production's pretty phenomenal. And for an album like this where like everything is so like detailed and arranged, like the production obviously has a ton to do with how the overall sound is going to be and just the way that he weaves in the horns and the orchestration on top of that, funky bottom end is so great. I love some of the at the very end of the album. Wild and Free and Give It Up, especially. It's just such a good 1-2 combo with those horns. And yeah, I mean, everybody's playing great, and just the way that Mayfield is able to work in those strings, to tug on the heartstrings, and the jubilant horns to just sort of, make you stand up and take notice. It's yeah, immaculately produced and arranged.
Best and worst tracks. Worst for me is, I think, actually, Don't Worry If There's a Hell Below, We're All Going to Go. Runner up, worst track would be The Other Side of Town, which has a huge impact on how I feel about this record. My two least favorite songs are the first two tracks on the record. I think if it was sequenced a little differently, I think I'd feel maybe a little stronger about the record overall. Like I kind of alluded to when I was talking about the songwriting. The more political stuff is my lesser favorite lane for him, and it takes a little while for this record to get into the kind of like sweeter ballady type tunes. So slow start for me. Favorite song is the closing track. Give It Up.
Worst song, I don't know. It's hard to pick one. Maybe Don't Worry If There's a Hell Below, We're All Gonna Go just because of the length. I believe there was a single version. It was the single from the album, which seems very odd. It was the only one to chart in the US.
Move on up. Never.
Did not
That's
chart in the US. I
that's
don't know
crazy.
if it wasn't released. It charted forever in the UK, like 50 weeks or something. Went to number 12 the next year. But for whatever reason, Don't Worry If There's a Hell Below, We're All Gonna Go was the one single from this album. Went to number 29, so it didn't like bomb, but that feels like the least likely candidate for a single.
Yeah.
So I'll say the full length version of that, probably my least favorite, but I still like it. And my favorite, probably Move On Up because it's just so, I don't know, indelible. It's a classic, but pretty much all of side two is just like banger after banger. I could pick any of them.
Yeah, it's backloaded for sure. I think it just gets better and better as it goes. Okay, scores for me. I am gonna go a light 4 stars on this, just barely getting to the 4 star mark. I was kind of maybe thinking 3.5 for a while, but I don't know. I looked at my Superfly score. I have that at 4, and I think I like this a little bit more, so I give it a little nudge up.
Yeah, I think I definitely like this more than Superfly. It's just more songs and the arrangements I think are better in some ways. Maybe not as funky, Superfly, but you get plenty of funk on Move On Up. And don't worry if there's a hell below, we're all gonna go. So I'm at a high 4.5. Could get to 5.
Well,
I'm not quite ready to go to go up to the 5 star margin.
all right. Well, let us know what you think of this record. I'm sure a lot of people out there would put it at 5. But yeah, drop that in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe. Of course, as we've been talking about a lot lately, we have a record for sale on our website, tastelikerecords.com. So we'd be expanding beyond YouTube and trying to become a little bit of a record label here. So if you buy records, that will help us in doing more records. Other than that, you can check out Patreon, where we have additional content. You can vote on polls determining what kind of stuff we cover on the channel. And yeah, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.